The day I became the pariah of Cedar Ridge Lakeview was the same day I became its most dangerous resident. It all started with a $500 fine half, a grand just for fishing with my daughter. What the neighborhood HOA didn't know was that I had $4.2 million in liquid assets, decades of experience outmaneuvering corporate sharks, and a heart full of grief they couldn't possibly understand. My name is Remington Foxwell. This is the story of how I went from mourning father to HOA slayer, and how a single afternoon at the lake shattered the illusion of suburban peace. A new beginning, or so I thought, 6 months after losing my wife to ovarian cancer. I decided my daughter and I needed a fresh start. The house we'd lived in for years held too many memories, too many echoes of Rachel's laugh in the hallways, her voice in the kitchen, her humming while folding laundry. Our daughter Alara, only 14, had gone from a bubbly, artistic teenager to a ghost of herself. Fishing had always been our family's thing. Before the diagnosis, we'd escape the city on weekends, finding solace in quiet lakes and the gentle rhythm of casting lines. So I found us a home near water, not just any water, a private, glittering 6-acre lake right in the center of Cedar Ridge Lakeview. A gated community praised for its serenity and standards. The real estate agent called it the crown jewel of suburban living. She did mention a homeowners association, but brushed it off as standard, just lawn rules and exterior paint stuff. Nothing intense. I should have known something. Was off when her smile faltered briefly as she added, "The HOA president, Ms. Cordelia Sharp, is very passionate about maintaining order." A perfect morning ruined. It was a Saturday morning when it all went sideways. The sun had just kissed the water's edge, and for the first time in weeks, Ilara laughed, a real laugh. She had just reeled in a bluegill and was taking pictures with her phone when a shrill voice cracked across the comm. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I turned to see a woman power walking toward us with the intensity of a corporate auditor, mid-50s, expensive jogging set, platinum blonde bob that screamed high maintenance, a tablet clutched tightly like it held federal secrets. "I'm Cordelia Sharp," she snapped. "President of the Cedar Ridge Lakeview HOA. Fishing is strictly prohibited. This is a violation." I blinked. "I'm sorry," the realtor told. "Us, the lake was for residents. We just moved in 2 months ago, it was. Until last month, we amended the recreational guidelines. All residents were notified via email." I kept my tone neutral. I never got that email. She gave me a condescending smile. "You should check your spam folder." Then came the kicker. The fine is $500, payable within 10 business days. Further violations will escalate. Ilara's face fell. I saw tears forming. All I could think was, how could something as innocent as fishing with my daughter warrant such venom? I nodded slowly. "Please send me the updated bylaws and the fine notice in writing." "Of course," she said, already turning away. "Next time, read your emails. We uphold standards here. Standards or suppression." That night, after checking every folder in my inbox and finding no such notification, I started digging. I wasn't just going to roll over. Spent 15 years in venture capital. My job had been sniffing out inconsistencies and sniffing out predators. It didn't take long to uncover that Cordelia had been HOA president for over a decade. She also ran her own luxury property firm. Okay? A conflict of interest? Absolutely. Even more damning, I found social media posts of her and her friends holding wine-soaked parties at the very lake she'd fined me for standing next to. They weren't just using it, they were flaunting it. Fishing was banned, but sipping Chardonnay in paddle boats was just fine. Hypocrisy was the real policy. Meet the underground 2 days later. While walking my dog, I ran into a man raking leaves. He introduced himself as Miles Townsend, a retired judge, no less. "You've met Queen Cordelia, haven't you?" he asked. I nodded, sighed. "She's been running this place like her personal dictatorship. Most people don't have the time or money to fight her. They pay the fines and keep their mouths shut." I told him what happened at the lake. His eyebrows rose. "You should come by for tea," he said, lowering his voice. "You're not the first. You won't be the last." That evening, I was welcomed into a quiet alliance of residents who had all, in one way or another, been harassed or manipulated by the HOA. It included Marissa King, pediatric nurse fined for planting unapproved flowers; Carlos Rivera, a widower who had been threatened with foreclosure over a minor shed renovation; Naya Freeman, a single mother who had been accused of violating visual harmony for hanging. Halloween decorations. We called ourselves the 43rd Street Society, named after the road that housed the community clubhouse, where none of us felt welcome. Follow the paper trail with help from Marissa, who had access to legal tools through her work. I discovered that the lake wasn't technically owned by the HOA, was still held by the original developer, a company called Aegis Valley Holdings, which had leased it to the community under a 30-year recreational contract, expiring in 57 days. Even more revealing, Cordelia had been quietly negotiating a purchase of the lake not for the HOA, but for her own development company. She wasn't trying to preserve the lake. She was trying to turn it into her next luxury condo project. The real reason fishing was. We pieced it together quickly. Step 1. Ban common resident access. Step 2. Lower usage metrics for HOA. Annual reports. Step 3. Argue to the community that the lake is underutilized and costly. Step 4. Announce her company will purchase it to help the HOA. Step 5. Flip the land for multi-million-dollar gains. Classic monopolistic behavior. But Cordelia made one fatal mistake. She underestimated. A grieving father with financial resources, community support, and time. I make my movies in one of my shell corporations. I contacted Aegis Valley Holdings and asked to meet regarding a potential cash offer on the lake property. They were skeptical until I offered $375,000 with a 7-day close. No financing needed. They agreed pending inspection to stay invisible. I filed the offer through Lakeshore Asset Group. Name Cordelia wouldn't connect to me yet. As she was prepping her community announcement about the exciting new HOA-owned lake restoration project, I was finalizing the deal behind her back. Escalation the moment she sensed something was wrong. Harassment intensified. I received 7 violations in 1 week, ranging from mailbox angle to grass height. Ilara was targeted at school by the kids of HOA board members. We found notes taped to our mailbox saying, "Go back to the city." Someone threw fish guts on our front porch. I documented everything. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calculating. Cordelia was digging her own grave and I was handing her the shovel. Chapter 10. The hammer drops the morning after I officially closed on the lake. Emergency budget meeting where Cordelia announced a special assessment to raise funds for community lake enhancements. I stood up. Madam President, is this the same lake recently sold to Lakeshore Asset Group? She blinked. The sale closed 3 days ago, I continued, handing out printouts of the sale deed. And as of this moment, your organization has no legal authority over it. Gasps, murmurs. Cordelia stammered. This is a mistake. This is ... illegal. ... illegal. On the contrary, I said calmly, what you've done is illegal filing fake rules, intimidating residents. Attempting to defraud the HOA by selling property to yourself? The HOA board members looked stunned. Half of them had clearly been kept in the dark. I ended with this. Let me be very clear. I own the lake. It will remain open to residents free of charge. You are banned from hosting any exclusive events or issuing fines related to its use. The room erupted in applause. The aftermath. Cordelia resigned within 48 hours, citing health reasons. 3 board members stepped down in disgrace. Special election was held. I didn't run, but I did endorse a new leadership team built around transparency, fairness, and community restoration. We rebranded the lake as Rachel's Haven, in honor of my late wife. Fishing returned. So did laughter. Lara smiled again, not just at the lake, but everywhere in me. I realized that even in grief, even in war with power-hungry bureaucrats, you can reclaim joy. You can rebuild, because sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's redemption. The morning I transferred $350,000 into escrow to buy the lake at the center of Lakeside Oaks wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a personal declaration of war. For months, I had endured intimidation, passive-aggressive rule violations, public smearing, and worse, all orchestrated by one woman, Karen Wellington,
Oh.
the power-hungry president of our homeowners association. But what Karen didn't know what no one in our so-called gated community suspected was that I wasn't just another quiet resident trying to keep my lawn trimmed and my mailbox regulation height. I was a former venture capitalist with decades of experience in flipping high-value assets. And now, I was turning all that experience toward one goal, ending her reign of fear and restoring dignity to the people who called this neighborhood home, breaking the monopoly of control. When I wired that money, I also activated a promise I had made to myself the day Karen fined me $500 for fishing with my daughter at the lake where my late wife and I used to take her. That moment broke something in me and built something else: resolve. My neighbor and ally, Samuel Washington, a retired banker, was the first to encourage my plan to outbid Karen's backdoor offer to Meridian Development for the lake. He even offered me a $50,000 personal loan to make sure we could lock the deal in without delays. 2 days later, the ink dried on the purchase agreement, and Rachel's Lake, as it would later be known, officially became mine, 100% privately owned. Right down to the 10-foot border around the Warler Corinth, had no clue. She was too busy preparing for her big HOA meeting, where she planned to unveil renderings of an exclusive members-only lakeside clubhouse that would conveniently wipe out the remaining public fishing access points. Karen's grand plan goes public. Her PowerPoint presentation was called Elevating Lakeside Oaks, a vision for premium living. What she didn't disclose was that her private real estate firm would be the exclusive broker and developer for the new luxury lakefront units, or that these units would only be available to select buyers, specifically her close circle of friends and political allies. Certainly not that the entire scheme relied on her successfully acquiring the lake from Meridian Development, something she believed was inevitable, but it was. Karen also used the meeting as a political soapbox. Without naming names, she launched into a thinly veiled attack on new residents who don't share our values and financially unstable outsiders, stirring discord. Samuel stood up to challenge her, only to be humiliated by a snide remark about an old IRS audit that had been resolved years ago. That was Karen's style: dig up the past, distort it, weaponize it. Sapphira Duskind, a local florist and board member, tentatively suggested a community vote before altering access to shared amenities. Karen stared her down and icily reminded her that her flower shop's lease renewal was coming up soon. The threat was clear and effective. Political pressure and personal attacks. Karen wasn't just a bully, she was strategic. Within 48 hours of my purchase, she had the mayor's office, a friend of hers from campaign season, send city inspectors to review my property. Suddenly, I was facing citations for renovations done by the home's previous owner years earlier. One of the inspectors, coincidentally, was her cousin-in-law. Even worse, my daughter Celine was being ostracized at school. Classmates whispered that we were troublemakers and trying to ruin the neighborhood. It almost broke me, and then the phone rang. It was Meridian's legal team. Karen Wellington has been notified that the lake has been sold to a third-party investor. All negotiations with her have been terminated. The storm was here, and I was ready. The Queen's meltdown the next day. Karen showed up at my door. No fake pleasantries. No small talk. "You sabotaged my deal," she hissed. "I know it was you. Don't think for a second this is over." "Oh, I heard the lake was sold. Hope the HOA has a good relationship with the new owner," I replied. Eyes calm, tone casual. "You'll regret this. We'll sue. We have rights. Check your paperwork," I smiled. "The recreational access agreement expires in 28 days. Renewal is at the discretion of the new owner." Her silence spoke volumes. The coup de grace. HOA's big event goes sideways. Karen couldn't accept defeat. She tried to rally the old guard with a massive lakeside party, complete with caterers, string lights, and 2 open wine bars. Invitations were sent only to longtime residents, not a single new homeowner included. What she didn't know was that I had filed paperwork terminating the recreational use agreement early. citing environmental neglect. The HOA had failed too. Prevent fertilizer runoff, leading to toxic algae blooms and declining fish health. Grounds enough for immediate termination. As Karen toasted the future of Lakeside Oaks, I arrived, flanked by Merrick, Samuel, my attorney, and a uniformed police officer. "Good afternoon," I said into the microphone. "Hope you're enjoying the view. Fortunately, this event is now in violation of trespassing laws." Gasps. Karen's face drained of color. "You're bluffing," she snapped. "Not at all." I held up the deed. "Effective today, this lake is private property, and this gathering is over." Within minutes, the crowd dispersed. And Karen. She looked like a dethroned monarch standing in the ashes of a coup. Repercussions, reform, and Arekanai installed signs and private security around the lake. I held a press event to explain the new direction for the space. An educational fishing and conservation zone open to all families with one exception. Board members of the current HOA leadership. Rumors spread quickly. Karen tried to claim the lake was poisoned. I responded by publishing third-party water safety test results, showing it was cleaner than ever. She grew desperate. She tried to bribe Merrick into persuading me to sell the lake back. She offered to erase his violations and seat him on a new board. What she didn't know, Merrick was a retired ethics attorney, and he recorded the entire conversation. The final nail in Karen's coffins: some wars are won with lawyers, some with votes, some with a silent camera, a glass lake, and a criminal caught in the act. It happened just after midnight. My security system, motion-sensitive, multi-angle rig I'd installed after months of harassment and escalating. Threats buzzed quietly on my phone. I was in my study reviewing architectural drafts for a new dock when I got the alert. When I opened the live feed, I didn't expect to see what I saw. 3 shadows moving along the shoreline. 2 of them I didn't recognize. But the third, I'd know that haughty gait anywhere. Karen Wellington, HOA president, realtor, puppet master of bureaucracy, and apparently amateur eco-terrorist. She crouched near the water's edge, pulling something from her oversized tote. The camera caught the glint of a bottle, the pour of a liquid, and a hushed whisper, "That should do it." The next morning I didn't go to war. I made a phone call. Within 24 hours, officers arrived at Karen's door with a warrant. The evidence was irrefutable: trespassing, environmental tampering, and criminal intent to harm private property. She was handcuffed in front of her ornamental hedges, still in silk pajamas, screaming about entrapment and entitled land. Barons. But the worst for her was yet to come. Unraveling the empire Karen's arrest triggered the inevitable. Audits. Investigators began pulling records from the HOA's financial archives. What they found was a blueprint of corruption. Hundreds of thousands in misallocated funds labeled as beautification projects were traced to inflated contractor invoices from companies owned by Karen's friends. Violation citations. Dreaded orange slips slapped on mailboxes were handed out in clear patterns. Homes owned by single parents, retirees, recent arrivals were fined far more often than those of Karen's inner circle. Worse still, she had used her influence to manipulate property valuations, driving down the market value of certain homes, only for her real estate firm to quietly purchase them months later. The lawsuits came in a flood. Homeowners Karen had financially targeted joined forces. One elderly widow who had been threatened with foreclosure over a cracked walkway ended up as lead plaintiff in a civil suit that would ultimately bankrupt Karen's firm. The queen had fallen. The court of public opinion had turned. The community. Rebuilds. I knew it wasn't enough to tear something down. We had to build something better in its place. So, I hosted the most important meeting of my life. Every resident in Cedar Ridge Lakeview received an invitation. Everyone except the HOA board. On the evening of the meeting, folding chairs filled every inch of my backyard. Neighbors who'd barely spoken before now huddled in groups, murmuring about what had happened and what might come next. Ilara passed out lemonade, while Merrick and Samuel set up a projector. At exactly 7 p.m., I stepped forward and laid out my plan. A blueprint for real community change doesn't happen through revenge, I said. It happens through structure. Here's what I proposed. A full HOA leadership restructure, starting with immediate resignations and new elections. Board positions would be limited to 2-year terms, the mandatory rotation system to prevent power monopolies. Creation of an independent ethics committee, a body of rotating, randomly selected community members responsible for reviewing HOA decisions for fairness, transparency, and legality. Immediate transfer of the lake into a permanent, irrevocable community trust. It would no longer belong to any developer, board, or association. The trust's charter ensured that no individual or group could ever privatize or commercially exploit. Rachel's Lake again? I paused. People were nodding, murmuring in agreement. But then I dropped the bombshell. The leverage that changed everything some. You may not know this, I said, holding up a folder. But over the past 30 days, I've been acquiring mortgage notes. The room fell silent. Through my investment for Mand with help from Samuel's banking contacts, I now hold the debt on nearly 20% of the properties in this community, including those owned by Karen and her allies. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I waited, letting it sink in. I'm not here to foreclose, I added quickly. I'm here to forgive, or at least to offer refinancing at below-market rates. But only for residents who support these reforms and commit to creating a fair, ethical, inclusive community moving forward. And just like that, Karen's empire of fear collapsed. Rachel's Lake. A new legacy. The vote came a week later. 3 board members resigned. 2 more were removed by community petition. Sapphira Dusklin, once a timid florist, silenced by Karen's threats, was elected as the new HOA president in a landslide vote. Her first order of business? Renaming the lake in a unanimous show of support. Cedar Ridge Lakeview residents voted to rename it Rachel's Lake in honor of my late wife, who had loved nature, justice, and most of all, family. I transferred the title to the community trust with 3 conditions. It must remain publicly accessible to residents in perpetuity. It may never be sold, subdivided, commercially developed. It must be used for education, conservation, and community events. We didn't just fix the lake, we transformed it into something sacred, a community reborn. We launched a lake conservation initiative with local environmentalists. We restored native plants, rebuilt fish habitats, and tested water quality monthly. Then we held the first community fishing day. Every family showed up. Kids learned to bait hooks and cast lines. Parents taught their toddlers to skip rocks. From opposite sides of old HOA feuds, shared coolers and memories. It was the first time in years that neighbors weren't just neighbors, they were friends. That evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Alara and I sat on the dock. Her head rested against my shoulder. She whispered, "Mom would be proud of you." I didn't look away from the water. "No," I said. "She'd be proud of us." 1 year later, today Cedar Ridge, now renamed Lakeside Oaks, is known throughout the county as a model for HOA reform. We have term limits and public voting. Financial transparency is mandatory. The ethics committee rotates quarterly, and the lake, it's thriving ecologically and socially. I was approached by several local leaders about running for mayor after James Wilson, our scandal-plagued former mayor and Karen's longtime ally, quietly declined to run for re-election. I turned them down. Instead, I used part of my investment portfolio to found the Rachel Thorncroft Foundation, scholarship fund for children who have lost a parent to illness. Because in the end, this battle wasn't about property lines or fishing rights. It wasn't about winning power. It was about rebuilding what had been broken in our community, in my daughter's heart, and in the place where I thought peace was impossible. A final word to you. It's watching this if you're watching this video. Because you're stuck fighting your own HOA, your own Karen, your own bureaucratic bully. Remember this? You don't have to match their cruelty. You don't have to match their manipulation. You just have to understand the rules better than they do. Use truth as your strategy. Use patience as your shield. Use integrity as your sword. And when the moment comes, don't just tear down the old system. Build a better one. Because justice isn't just about punishment. It's about legacy. And this is Rachel's legacy. And now, it's yours too.